Hello everyone, I'm Tina Zeng. I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Arim Lee, and I also use she, her pronouns. We're the commentary editors at the Phillipian, and welcome to a podcast on a discussion for mental health at Andover.
Yeah, so we'll be talking about mental health within the student body, specifically here at Andover, but also just mental health in general for our generation. So yeah, enjoy and subscribe to the Phillipian. Okay. Everyone welcome.
Yeah, so we're just going to start off by asking you to introduce yourselves really quickly. So just, name, grade, pronouns, and then just, where you're from, that sort of stuff. Does anyone want to?
Hi, my name is Cate Cummings. I'm a freshman, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm from Los Angeles, California, but on campus I live in Nathan Hale House.
Nice. My name is Ben Forman. From New York City. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a senior, but I was a new upper last year, and I live in Bishop.
My name is Tasnia Begum. My pronouns are she, her, from New York City too.
Cool.
I live in Eaton Cottage, and I'm a freshman.
My name is Eddie Lowe. I'm an upper. I'm a prefect in FEAS, and I'm from New Jersey and Florida, I guess.
Okay.
I use he, him pronouns.
Yeah, so to start, we just want you guys to sort of talk about and speak to why mental health is important to you guys. Anyone can start.
I'll go. I guess for me, I've always had a lot of issues surrounding anxiety and panic and that sort of stuff. And so, I don't know, I feel like especially with teens, especially in this day and age, it's probably one of the biggest topics for all of us because all of us are probably dealing with our own issues. And so, I don't know, I think it's really important to talk about it because that's the first step in kind of making progress.
Agreed, because when I feel like, mental health has been such a big thing since COVID because I feel like for a lot of us, COVID really ruined that mental stability, I guess. And then coming to Andover, I realized that if my mental health isn't okay, if I'm not feeling physically or emotionally well, everything kind of just messes up.
Yeah, I agree. I think over 50% of people will experience some sort of mental health problem at some point in their lives, and I think it's really important to be able to destigmatize that. I think a lot of people just think of mental health as something that happens to people, but it's not okay to really talk about it or to think of it as important as physical health, but I think it really is, and especially coming into Andover, which is such a high pressure place. If you're not, mentally and emotionally and physically okay, then all of the built on stress and pressure will really get to you.
Yeah, I mean, adding off of your point about COVID, I think that affected everyone. But a lot of teens too, just isolated, and then in return, social media and how that played out, I think is an interesting topic that we'll get into probably. But yeah, I mean, we go to the best high school in the world, or not in the world, in America. But with that comes high expectations, and I think here is especially a place where we need to understand what people are going through.
Yeah. Okay. You can just keep talking if anybody had sparked some kind of thought.
Yeah, I think you mentioned social media, and I think that's also a really big part because there are a lot of influencers and a lot of different things happening on social media that just can, I guess, make you feel oh wow, am I the only one feeling this way? Where all the other people feel like they're just having such an amazing time and they just are having such a wonderful life, and you're like, well, why don't I feel the same way?
Yeah, it's funny. I could talk about social media for a whole day. So the Happiness Project is it's a 2-week meditation, no social media, along with gratitude project, where we're just trying to kind of uplift and improve people's mindfulness on campus. We started last year as a study to test the effects of social media on kids. So we had like about 20 kids delete their social medias, and we tested their effects every day. And then this year we're focused less really on the scientific aspect and more just like a cleanse of all of this. Every weekday we're going to be doing a meditation, and we're going to have everyone delete, and then we're also giving everyone a journal so they can free write every day about things they're grateful for. I've had mine deleted for like 2 years at this point. Yeah, I started during COVID actually. But yeah, it's just like, I don't know, the way that I got it explained to me is like everything that we use in our day-to-day lives is a product, and we pay for it, like food, our clothes, our house, our entertainment, everything. But you don't pay for social media, right? And then you start to think about it, and you're like, why is it free? Like, I spend hours a day on this app, and it's free. Yeah. And it's like, because you're not the customer, you're the product. Like, you're getting sold, right? Like, social media is a business meant to just take your attention. It's addictive. It's not there to help you. It's there to sell your time to advertisers. So I don't know. There's so much that I have problems with like all those applications. We can keep talking about it because I'm really passionate about that issue.
For sure. I mean, I'm gonna partake in a happiness project. Yeah. Really happy to say that I can get into that. I think over the summer, at the beginning of summer, I did something similar. I just did not use, well, I don't really use Snapchat, but I deleted my Instagram account, and then I didn't have TikTok, I don't think, until the end of summer. But yeah, I mean, that was a really transformative experience. For me, I get the point about, you know, unrealistic image with social media, how that perpetuates what you think people are doing in their lives and how that masks, you know, the behind the scenes versus what they're actually performing. But for me, it was strictly just the attention aspect. It robbed me of all my focus that I had, and I just was unproductive. And I think productivity was where, like, my mental health really was centered on about, you know, my work and what I'm doing. And if I'm not able to do that, then I get stressed. Then I get, you know, worried about whether I'm procrastinating or whether deadlines are coming up. And social media only made that worse because, you know, if I just faced an obstacle, I would just go check my phone instinctually, and then it just wouldn't get done. So yeah, that's how it really affected me over the summer.
Yeah, I totally agree because social media has just been like this facade, just where you could like leave all your worries behind, and then you could just go and keep scrolling, keep on watching videos, and not have to like be preoccupied with something else. But like Eddie was saying, that I really began to procrastinate more with social media, and I kept like not even conversing with my friends just in person, and then I kept focusing on social media or talking to them there, and then seeing these influencers or Photoshop, and I got like really concerned with like body image, and then my mental health kept deteriorating. And I feel like the happiness project that you're doing, Ben and Eddie, that'll like really help, because taking away social media and just focusing on yourself is something that can be really influential for you.
Right. But I think another crucial part of the project is the mindfulness and the meditation aspect of it. I also did like daily things over the summer, and the way I saw it, it sort of remedied the effects that social media had on me. First of all, you cut out the root issue, sure, but you're still left with dealing with the symptoms. And mindfulness sort of reverses that. You begin to center yourself around what you're thinking instead of just mindlessly doing things. Now you're more aware, you're more conscious of who you are and what you're doing. And I think that's another really, really important part of that project.
Yeah, I think also, like, you were talking about like feeling isolated. And I don't know, for me it's so ironic. Like, I could go to a party and have like all my friends there and everyone that like I care about, and people would be on social media. And I'm like, the point of these apps is to connect with people, and you're surrounded by your friends and you're on the app. So it's like, what's the point of that? Like, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense. You're surrounded by people who you were using the apps to communicate with, and they're in front of you, yet you're still using the apps. And so that kind of like, I don't know, it made me realize that these apps aren't there to connect us. They're a crutch, like, that we use to kind of like uphold our kind of brain functioning. And we can also talk about like these dopamine hits that we're constantly receiving. And I don't know, I feel like kids these days, we've become so like reliant on them, like whether it's watching videos, going on social media, watching TV, like eating, doing anything except just like being, and just like being okay with not doing anything. That's like tying into the mindfulness aspect. Yeah, I feel like it's a big problem that a lot of us face.
For sure. Yeah, earlier you mentioned dopamine, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with Andrew Huberman. He's a neuroscientist at Stanford. He has a podcast called the Huberman Lab, and he goes into all of the psychology and anatomy about how to improve yourself with science and also concrete tips. And he talked about dopamine, and I think it's somewhat misunderstood, according to him, that it's in the reward mechanism, but you don't receive dopamine after the action. So for example, like you want to eat a cookie, right? So before eating the cookie, after you eat the cookie, it would be conceived that that's when dopamine is released. But dopamine is released in order to motivate you to eat the cookie in the first place. So before you take that bite. And the reason why that distinction is somewhat important is because it's not necessarily that we're getting dopamine when we check the phone. It's just we're drawn to it. That's where the dopamine comes from. And he also talked about how there's a baseline level. And whenever you go above that, that always has to dip below. It has to maintain that balance. But when it dips below, it has to go below the baseline before reaching. And I think that's really important because it shows that every action has its consequence. So, for example, if you indulge in something really stimulative, there's going to be like a sugar crash right after. And the same goes for the opposite. So let's say you had a really productive day, right? Sure, you might not feel great about it because you're in the zone, you're working, but that sync will lead to a rise. And I think implementing what's known as delayed gratification, which strives to get that pressure downwards before going upwards, is another key component.
So you guys are like talking a lot about like social media and its effect on you guys as teenagers. Do you think there's anything unique about being at Andover and like being at a boarding school that kind of like exacerbates or like affects that?
I found myself on social media a lot more because I lived away from home. And so I would end up not only like texting or calling my family members, but I'd like see my family members on social media too, like with their photos and all of that. And I feel like seeing that, I also felt like really isolated and more homesick. It's a bit different from the topics we were talking about before, but just personally, like I felt like I wasn't being included in something that I could have been if I was still back at home. And so at Andover, even if it was a #1 school in the United States, like it didn't feel right for me to be here while everyone I loved was back at home doing fun things that I saw on social media.
Yeah, I agree because I think social media is a way for us to also see, as you mentioned, our family members or our friends back at home, and like you see them, for example, going to a winter formal or just hanging out at the beach, and that kind of just also makes you feel like, wow, I'm missing out on something. And also at Andover, you don't always like have your parents there or have other people there to kind of limit that. So I guess it's much easier to kind of get into that kind of spiral where you're just continuously scrolling. And also I think social media, because now they have where you can direct message people, so it's even easier to just get hooked onto it because you're texting friends and then you're also scrolling. So it's just getting more into that rabbit hole.
Yeah, I remember for me when I was on it, I was always looking at what my friends were doing, and I felt like it was so easy to just feel left out all the time. Like anytime they were doing something I wasn't invited to, I would just be looking. And so you're talking about boarding school being here, it's like that's all you're looking at is just things that you're not a part of, feeling like, oh, I wish I was there, I wish that was better. Like, I don't know, it's so easy to get wrapped up in that. And the other thing, I think you were talking about this earlier, but like this is a high stress environment, right? And so if social media acts as a crutch and we have even more weight on our shoulders, we're gonna need it more than like other kids. And so I do think it's like a nationwide, worldwide epidemic, but in a high stress environment, I think it just exacerbates the problem.
How do you guys
I think there's like an interesting paradox with boarding school students, because I feel like, you know, if you're going to a public school, you're there, you most likely have lived there for a while. And when you hear about these kids who are going and living away as high schoolers, we are offered a really unique experience. Our experience is sometimes glorified, as in they're like, oh my God, they get to do really cool things, right? Which is one thing. But I think from our perspective, or at least from mine, it seemed like I was doing the same thing every single day in and day out. It would just be wake up, go to classes, do work, go to sports, come back, do more work, get ready for tomorrow, and you just be living until the weekend. And I think social media was my way of coping, of just being able to maintain that, because it just felt like I was doing the same thing every single day. And it just wasn't as, you know, fun or interesting as I thought it would have been.
I guess I'm wondering, like, how like these factors that we're mentioning, right? Like the stress of it, the amount of work you have, the fact that you're away from home, like the fact that you're away from the people that you've always been around. Like, how does that make mental health at Andover, like, unique? Or how does that make this place different? Or does it at all?
And feel free to talk about psychs a little if you have any experience with it and you feel comfortable sharing what you went through.
Yeah, so I think with mental health at boarding school, I guess something unique, as you said, is psychs, because we have some place on campus where we're said that we can go to if we have any problems, because, you know, a boarding school, you're on campus, you're living on campus, so all of your resources is still on campus, as opposed to, you know, if you're going to a public school and then you'd have your own, you know, healthcare provider. And I think, you know, with psychs, as you were talking about with my personal experience, well, I was very sick in the beginning of the school year with bronchitis, and I mean, this is not really talking about mental health, but I can also go into this after that. But so I went to psychs, and I would go continuously because I would have to get breathing treatments and have inhalers and get a bunch of medication. And I never had any problems before, so it was kind of a mystery being like, why am I feeling this way? And so when I would go to psychs, they'd try to help me, and eventually they'd kind of be like, well, you know, it's at this point where we're not really willing to help you anymore. And so they would actually blatantly refuse me treatment, and I would go there, and then they'd be like, well, you look fine, so please leave now. And they even started saying, well, maybe you have some sort of mental problem that is contributing to your feelings, because I would have a lot of shortness of breath and inability to breathe. And they'd be like, well, maybe your mental health is somehow contributing to that. And I mean, sure, your mind and your body is connected, but I don't think that necessarily is grounds for you being able to kind of diagnose someone of something, and, you know, without really helping them in the beginning. And also with mental health, I think a lot of Andover's resources, they're good to go to, but to a certain extent, because I do know a few people that I'm extremely close to who have been on forced medical leave, and the experience would kind of go, it would be actually a lot of the same things happening. So I think, you know, I mean, we do have a unique experience with mental health where, you know, you have a problem and then you go reach out because of that problem, and then you get sent home with that problem not even being fixed. It's just you having to deal with it somewhere else. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it, where it's very, very hard.
Does anybody else have, I mean, like, first of all, thank you for sharing. That's a lot to deal with, especially freshman fall. But yeah, does anyone else have another experience with psychs, or like a different experience that they'd be willing to share?
I think Cate and I are like, we're kind of shared in this experience, because as a prefect in the dorm, we're trained to address situations like this. I remember, actually I can't say that, but yeah, at the beginning of the year during orientation, student leaders, they undergo like training for various instances, and to be honest, I don't really remember exactly what we learned. I think that's somewhat of an issue. I don't think we were trained well enough, because the one thing I do remember was to always get help. Like, not to worry alone or whatever the mantra was, but to always, either get other house counselors involved when you're concerned. And an instance did happen in my dorm where I did have to, bring a student to psychs, but I really did not know anything about what happened after that. It just felt like I was, the middleman in this whole entire machine, and I just did my duty, and that was it. Yeah.
I don't know. For me, I haven't really had too much experience going to psychs for mental health problems, but I do know a bunch of kids who have. I'd say I don't know. I've been to 3 different high schools, and I think all of these problems have been universal throughout. Kids suffering, kids needing help, and schools not providing the adequate resources. I think a lot of times I think adults just really don't know what to do in a lot of these cases, and I think it can be hard because it's I think for 99% of these cases, kids really they just need to be listened to, and they just need to be heard and kind of seen that way. But then there's that 1% where it's a kid's really in danger, and then it's I don't know, it puts everyone in a really tough spot. So I'd say I don't think Andover or Psychs handles mental health worse than any other school institution in America. I think the difference is that they're just kind of opening up the skin behind it, and people start to really talk about it here, and so we get to see the problem that it is. And I think in a lot of other places you just don't talk about it, so you don't really get to see. I remember at my old schools, it's not like kids weren't suffering with mental health, it's just no one was talking about it. So no one even went to their school counselor, no one even went to the school psychologist, and so it was you don't even get to hear about these problems out in the daylight. Versus here, it's definitely pushed up, which I think is good, but I don't know.
For sure. I think that last point about the raising awareness is a really complex part of mental health. I think with COVID, at the earlier stages, it didn't seem like a lot of people were sick. And the reason being was because not a lot of people were getting tested. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a really similar situation here. Yes, we're raising more awareness, but that means now people are seeking more help, which is why now this issue seems like it's getting worse. But I think it's always been bad.
Yeah.
It's just now people are sort of waking up. And the thing with destigmatization and raising awareness is that it can be really helpful for those who need help. But at the same time, there's I don't know, this might sound a little weird and somewhat devil's advocate-y, but the expression, if it's broken, don't fix it, right? When you introduce something new to a person, it might sway them in the wrong way. If it's not broken, don't fix it.
Okay. You said if it's broken.
Oh, my bad. If it's not broken, don't fix it. And so when you now talk about mental health, for those who seemingly don't have any mental health issues, now they're wondering, do I not? And now it sort of muddles themselves, if that makes sense. I'm not saying that people shouldn't be aware. I'm just saying that awareness and destigmatization, while it is really important, it can also be very complex in how it affects everybody.
Yeah, I know the same thing for anxiety. It's a very confusing topic, right? Because anxiety itself, we all experience anxiety, but we don't all have an anxiety disorder or a very extreme case of it, right? And so even trained physicians have trouble diagnosing people for that, because it's just a spectrum and everyone falls in different parts of it. And so like you said, some kid may be feeling anxious and may say, oh, I have a disorder, when really they don't. And some kids might have a disorder and say, oh, it's just normal anxiety like everyone else, right? And so we have to, I don't know, be educated about where we fall and how our symptoms really reflect.
I wanted to add on to Kate's earlier point about psychs. For me, the first time I ever went to psychs here was freshman fall, and my advisor had recommended me to go there because of how I was feeling. And so I remember it was a Wednesday, and so it was the third day of classes. And I remember earlier that morning, one of the seniors at Andover told me to kind of not share as much, censor yourself a bit, because Andover could do a lot if they, if they find out that you're thinking thoughts that could be not good for you per se. And so when I first met with my counselor, I'd say it went okay, but I didn't feel completely better. And I was also thinking about Leo Peters, his article on mental health. Ninth graders had read that during EBI class, and it just hit me so hard because I was reading those quotes about it, and reading about how psych would need dozens of counselors if they wanted to fit every student's mental health priorities. And Andover wasn't this therapeutical organization or whatever it said earlier, but it just surprised me so much because I feel it's something so big, but it's just not recognized. And then with the self-awareness part too, I've always thought that I was okay, but then hearing these different things about self-awareness and then anxiety and mental health, am I okay, am I not? So then you are swayed just different ways because you don't know what you actually are.
I think when, and again, just to bring back to this is not just a problem here at Andover, it's a problem, in the whole country. It's just brought more awareness to students, especially on campus, because we're living on campus and we see how this affects so many people. But yeah, it's just, once you just send someone home, I guess it's not stopping them or preventing them from doing any harm to themselves. It is just preventing them from doing it on campus or bringing it aware to other people, other students, other faculty.
Yeah, I agree. I think the liability aspect is why it makes it really hard. I would say, I think going back to what you were saying about how it can be hard to share to a counselor because you don't really know where that information is going. I think that's why something like peer listeners is a really valuable kind of resource. Being able to talk to kids who they've been somewhat trained. They're not clinicians, but they're voiced and their ears that will listen to you. Because I think that's really what most kids need. I don't know about everyone, but I think most kids just need someone to listen to them, someone to validate their experiences, because a lot of us are just feeling really lonely, isolated, we're feeling uncomfortable, and that's not crazy emotions, that's normal in this environment, and I feel people just need to be listened to. And so something like that where you have other kids who've been through your experiences, they're not foreign adults, I think that can be really valuable.
I guess a question is, freshmen, would you have I'm sure you've heard of peer listeners, right?
Yes.
Who on campus do you trust to go to? Would you go to a prefect? Would you go to an advisor, a house counselor, a peer listener, a counselor? What resources do you lean into?
For me personally, I think after a lot of the things that I've seen and a lot of things I've gone through, I don't really trust any on-campus resources. That's just my personal feeling on this, but I would trust more of my parents. I do reach out to them a lot, as well as some off-campus professionals to help me. I would, go to peer listeners. I haven't yet, but I think that is a good resource that I might, go to. But I think just kind of from what I've experienced so far, I think for me, the best or the smartest thing to do is to get help off campus.
Yeah, I completely respect that decision too. For me, I definitely, now I don't go to places that I'm more unfamiliar with. I feel like I strictly speak with my advisor or my complimentary house counselors or my prefect, just like people in my dorm, because I feel like if I were to go outside of that, I'm revealing too much information, and then that will end up getting reported, and then something will happen to me. As for peer listeners, earlier in this year, there was a transition to Andover event thing in Underwood, and so I was surprisingly the only freshman there. But I met a few peer listeners and spoke about my experience. And while I haven't individually reached out to any of the peer listeners, thank you, Ben, for putting that out there, because I think it's actually pretty nice to know that there's upperclassmen kind of willing to listen to you, and they won't just tattletale on you or whatever.
Yeah. So the thing with peer listeners is I went to talk to some of them about their program, just to figure out more about what they're doing. And they receive about, again, don't quote me on this, I don't know if this is completely factual, but they do receive a good amount of training, 18 hours across the over the summer before they get here. And, they're good at what they do, but they do have these triggers where if you say something, they will direct you to psychs. And I think it really goes to show that this whole system of mental health here sort of funnels you all the way to psychs, and then, which is ironic because psychs can't handle all of this. It's clear, and it's not their fault. You know what I mean? There's a lot that's being done here, but it's almost as if it's placed on themselves by themselves, which is why I think prevention education is what is missing in this entire in this entire thing, because it's always going to be easier to prevent something, or at least treat something way before it gets to the point where you need to go talk to someone like a professional, or you need to go talk to psychs. But I just don't think there's any platform right now that can do that. I mean, EBI, as an EBI upper, we're kind of trying to do that, but again, it's not the best, obviously. There's definitely room for improvement, but a few other students and I, we went to psychs one time to talk to a counselor to, see what we could do better, how we could connect psychs and student-run organizations to improve the campus's mental health. And they also agreed that prevention education is sort of the missing link in this whole puzzle. Because if you think about it, there's probably a vast majority of other students who are sort of at this tipping point where they might need help, but they might be able to handle it on their own. And if you can just give them information or teach them important skills that they can, maintain a healthy mental health, then they don't need to cross over that border where things get more complicated.
Yeah, so kind of talking about that aspect of responsibility and what the school can do, what do you think are some ways that students themselves can work towards bettering their mental health and also just the community in general?
I mean, I think it's very, again, hard because just with a lot of things happening on campus. And I think, peer listeners, again, it is a really great resource for, students to be able to talk to other students and kind of be able to relate to how they feel, because, we all go through this high pressure institution where we're all just, working and, as Eddie is saying, kind of every day we're having just this set schedule and we repeat it daily and daily. So, I mean, I think, bringing awareness, again, it's very difficult because, bringing awareness at the same time, it's also bringing more people to possibly be, I guess, sent home. But I think it's just really important for us to be able to share our stories and, just to kind of say, well, sure, there is going to be, possible things that can happen to send you home, or for something to happen where you won't get the help that you need. but at the same time to be able to let students know and to give them the proper information that they need for them to be able to make the choice themselves. I think just giving everyone the adequate, amount of information needed, not to lie about anything, but just to be completely transparent to, our student body, so they themselves can make the decision that is best for them personally.
I think everybody's different, so it's not like a one size fits all. I think I personally, I don't think I have like a clinically like diagnosable like mental illness, but I think for me, there's so many different stressors in everybody's lives, but school is a very, very obvious one, especially here. Work is hard, and I think we all know that. And that's definitely one of the biggest contributors for stress for me. And I guess I'm talking to those who sort of agree that that's the main thing, where we have that privilege where this work is the main stressor of our lives. Yeah, I mean, as a student, what has helped me improve my mental health is what helped me get my work done, be more productive. So it's like, it sounds really almost superficial for me to say, work on your time management, work on your focus. But for those of you students who also share that same struggle as me, it's really that simple. It's simple, but it's not easy, I guess.
Does anyone else have like final thoughts, closing thoughts?
Can be about anything.
Yeah, anything at all.
I mean, I guess I would just say this problem of mental health is worldwide. It's an epidemic. It's really serious, and I think that that it's not easy. And so I think it's going to take a good amount of work, and everyone kind of has to buy in. And I think it's all about taking like small, manageable steps, like Eddie was saying, small, different habits in your life that you can kind of make it more like accessible to achieve some of the mindfulness, some of the peace, some of the balance that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I actually, just to kind of tie it back to like the Philippian, I'm actually writing an article and will publish it in the upcoming weeks. Actually about the stories of students on forced medical leave, and just to bring awareness to that, and as well as kind of let them, I guess, tell their stories for themselves. And so I really suggest, if any of you guys are interested in that, to look out for that, and when it's published, to read it. I think it's very important, and the people off campus will also be very appreciative of that.
Thank you, Kate.
All right. Thank you all for being here. It's a tough conversation, but I'm really glad that you guys all spoke openly and thoughtfully. So thank you, and yeah.